Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special council meeting for June 2020 to adopt the budget. My name is Councillor Margaret Thomas, and as Mayor, I will be chairing this meeting. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on and share the message of the elders. Kaya kaya broodiers, marmin and yoks, nuna de mort, nitchakulan nalamaya Kalamunda budja, ya ye, nandurapan, wadulas kulan, jina, nuna da nitcha, nunga budja, nunga broodiers kura, ya ye, burda, kedalak, burda, kaya, yunga. Hello, welcome to our leaders, men and women who have come to our place today this evening, and I'm happy to see you all standing on Noongar land of their leaders, past, present and future. Thank you. The operations of Council and the agenda for this meeting are governed by the provisions of the Local Government Act, standing orders and rules of conduct. All matters of business listed in the agenda will be dealt with as separate decisions of Council. Thank you for your attendance and interest. Do we have any apologies, CEO?
Through the Chair, no apologies, but Councillor Billich has advised that she's running late.
Thank you. We don't have any questions for public question time, and we have 2 deputations. So I'll ask Mr. Andy Farrant to please come to the microphone, state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Council staff, good evening, and thank you for letting me be here tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as well, and that we're meeting on their land. Councillors, you've heard me on a number of occasions talk about the impact of the arts and the impact that it can have on community well-being, resilience and quality of life. National and international research has demonstrated time and time again that the power of the arts in improving the lives of groups and individuals, for those people who are participants in the arts, creative contributors, passive audiences, all involved in the creative sector. A little bit of background on the research. The National Cultural Ministers Council 2017 noted that engagement with the arts improves cognitive skills, educational attainment for individuals, increases self-esteem, community confidence, boosts cohesion, social cohesion, and plays a role in crime prevention. The Department of State Government, Local Government, the State Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industries surveyed Australians. That survey confirmed that 94% of West Australian people agreed that arts and culture was important to their children. 81% agreed that it was important sector for government to support. 77% said that arts made them feel good, and 62% felt that arts was an important contribution made an important contribution to their community. Further afield, the US Federal Reserve Bank San Francisco branch office, following a natural disaster in San Francisco, noted that culture and creativity are not only forms of identity and expression, they are survival strategies and should be considered as a vital part of any community's resilience toolkit. Councillors, you in this budget have recognised that you have, thanks to COVID-19, a community that is under siege, is not resilient, and is socially or fiscally challenged. In addition to the direct support, which is one way to assist local residents to recover them and give them an opportunity to get together. I'll start that sentence again, I beg your pardon. In addition to direct support, one way to assist local residents to recover, given the opportunity to get together with their local fellow community members and celebrate local life, and just frankly talk to each other, is the arts. These occasions may include music, song, dancing, storytelling, drawing, painting, with groups of groups and individuals of professional artists involved as well. Creative activities help heal damaged communities because they allow the community to recalibrate, to talk out and deal with what's been a traumatic period for them. There will be residents who have been unable to visit aged members of their family. Some may have lost family members over the period and may not have been able to attend their funerals. These are unmanageable imposts on some people. I understand that the arts are able to access funds from the crisis relief reserve that's been set up, and this is really great news. As the new financial year advances, well, it starts tomorrow, the city's financial statements and as the city's financial statements becomes clearer, I'm making an appeal to you tonight that if there are unspent funds from the two reserve funds that have been set aside, if there are funds unspent in the second half of the new financial year, I'm seeking your approval for these funds to be used to support additional arts events. Programs and activities that in a way will create local employment for artists and arts workers, engage targeted sections of the community, whether they be in Wattle Grove, High Wycombe, Pickering Brook, throughout the city. Examples of these events could include the Noongar language choir performing in aged care facilities, in shopping centres, or indeed for the city's citizenship ceremonies. Local high school bands performing at Forestfield, High Wycombe and Kalamunda skate parks after school on Friday afternoons and evenings. Lounge room performances in places like the Zigzag Gallery, in libraries, in K-Pack and other city assets. Community arts events in shopping centres, whether they be for quilters or weavers or other handcrafted arts activities. Musical bands playing in the History Village, Kalamunda Youth Swing Band, not just in Sturk Park, but in different areas of the city. And Noongar cultural walks, well promoted and marketed, all of these will need to be, and open to sites of significance across the city. These are just a few ideas, and the city now has specialist arts staff and an active and informed advisory committee to be able to help flesh them out. With your expressed encouragement, work on this program could begin immediately in anticipation of funds possibly being available in the third quarter of the financial year. Nationally, the arts and creative sector is a massive industry, worth over $112 billion each year. In Western Australia, the value is over $10 billion. This sector was the first hit by COVID and will be the last to return to activity because it attracts people to get together. Only last week, the federal government finally announced some support for the sector. The arts is not being able to access JobKeeper or JobSeeker because of the casualised nature of the employment. The allocation of $250 million by the Commonwealth is seen as too little and certainly too late, which has been noted by peak arts bodies from across the country. This amount represents just 0.2 of 1% of the total national value of the sector. The arts has been damaged to the core by COVID, but perversely, it is also one of the most powerful and much valued activities in Australian life. Councillors, you'll note that through the budget process, the Arts Advisory Committee has not made any fund bids through the budget, although I understand that there's an amount of about $70,000 in the budget for some projects. While the committee is yet to allocate the discussion should it be passed tonight, I strongly recommend that these are applied to activate the existing arts centres that are city assets. I applaud the Council's allocation to the two reserve funds in use for this very strange position we're all in. But the real purpose of this deputation is to seek your approval and your drive as one of the outcomes of tonight's budget through the financial year is to not spend, and if reserve funds are not fully spent, is to go to meeting the needs of your quite damaged community, the businesses and the city itself through activities that invest in the arts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Farrant. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Sewell.
Thank you, Mr. Farrant, for your deputation. I'm just aware that $50,000 was made available to the City of Kalamunda through Minister Templeman, and I'm just wondering what the status of that funding is. My understanding there was a grant allocation that the City of Kalamunda was made application for. Yep.
Through the chair, the CEO may have a... I understand the background, but perhaps it's best...
Through the chair, yes, we have put in one of those submissions. I'll ask the manager of PR, Public Relations and Customer Service. It's her team that would have applied for that.
Yep, just confirming that we did attend meetings and place a grant application. I'll need to confirm the status because I understand that that funding may not still be available. Should it be still available, and for any cases where the City of Kalamunda is able to obtain external funding in relation to events that could be undertaken under the easing of COVID restrictions, we would actually be looking to put reports to Council in relation to those matters.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr Farrant?
Madam Mayor, sorry, if I can just go further to answer that question. Under the state government's emergency powers, those funds and a number of other funds that were in the department, in the arts section of local government, sport and cultural industries department, all has gone back to Lottery West, and they now have a very, very large war fighting fund for community. And there are applications, there have been 2 rounds of applications that have gone through and have been announced already. I'm not quite sure how many more there are to come, so that money is no longer available, I would say.
Thank you. Councillor Saul, did you have another question for Mr Farrant or our officers?
Yeah, just in relation to comments that our community is damaged, I'm just wondering on what basis that claim has been made?
The community has been damaged. We've been in lockdown. People haven't been able to see families. I gave the example of people unable to attend their own mother's funeral. Terrible ordeal for a gentleman I know. There are people who have really suffered through COVID. The mental health problems and a range of other things. And as we know from the media, there are people who have not also been attending to their general good health as well, although the number of walkers and cyclists out during the lockdown was a surprising and wonderful surprise. All of Australia, in fact the world, has been damaged, and there is a great opportunity, as there are after cyclones and floods and bushfires, for the arts to play a major role in bringing the community back together and reminding individuals and groups the many valuable things about our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to make a comment, Director?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, can I just add that one of the centrepieces of the arts strategy and the actions identified thereof is to embark very heavily on trying to get grant and external funding into the program. So that's going to be a piece of work that's already expected to be delivered as part of the art strategy in this coming year, and we'll certainly be expecting to pursue that pretty aggressively.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak to us. I would now like to ask Mr Peter Forrest to come forward. You know the drill, Peter. Name, address, and you have 10 minutes. Peter, if you could speak into the mic.
Panoramic Terrace, Kalamunda.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes. My input really is representing the Kalamunda District's Ratepayers and Residents Association. The following requests to councillors to consider changed community values and, in light of them, delve further into the detail provided for this meeting before adopting the municipal budget for 2020-21 as presented. First, we know that the total revenue for 2020-21 compared with 2019-20 as calculated to be almost equal. However, simply comparing rates set for the last financial year with this one on the basis of relative income and expenditure being frozen, as Council recently requested, is too simplistic. During the 2019-20 period, expenditure was noticeably excessive in some areas, such as to inflate services substantially above what we would regard as basic essential services needed by ratepayers. Ratepayers in current and foreseeable circumstances don't expect to have ultimate luxury in provision of every conceivable service, just efficient and cost-effective basic services with minimal wasteful bureaucracy and no fair reason to complain. Today we all need to have a serious reality check. With 21,676 domestic property owning ratepayers in Kalamunda, a high proportion of those properties have multiple family occupants, a total population of 58,954. Council rates for them are an unavoidable expense, not discretionary spend, and councillors must above all give very serious attention to that reality when fixing them for 2020-21. For both domestic and commercial ratepayers, most personal budgets are being pushed to the limit financially. Many businesses that employ those people will not survive the lockdown, and the effect is just now becoming real, and that will continue throughout 2020-21. Against that reality, the City Administration can of course be commended for documenting means for some ratepayers to apply for relief. But that in itself is further more complicated bureaucracy to worry about, while facing new, more intense competition for jobs and paying customers for businesses. Furthermore, of course, all ratepayers are still limited by the overhanging health threat of repeated waves of virus that when soon as the international borders open up, all sorts of people can be going in and out. Furthermore, of course, all ratepayers are still limited by our locality, our state, and all countries overseas are trying to return to some new form of both personal and economic normal. But restricted movement, trade, markets, and imported supplies are, and of course will continue to be, seriously disrupted throughout this financial year and beyond. City Administration opened discussion by lamenting, and I quote, shortfall of income required for the city to provide the necessary works and services. But that word necessary is interesting, and it deserves much more scrutiny by councillors, as it's a value judgment that must be set against current ratepayer realities. The large number and types of capital works and projects listed requiring diversion of funds and borrowings clearly do not accord with the type of frugal expectations of ratepayers in current dire circumstances. Almost no evidence is traceable in the budget papers that the city is making internal administrative or organisational economies or transfers between different departmental allocations, responding to crisis circumstances. The modest savings involved recorded seem to be more in the area of public events. For example, in the 2019-20 expenditure included a costly engagement of multiple external consultants to advise with inflated development planning bureaucracy, most of which is minimal beneficial effect for local ratepayers or residents. Yet that same unit is being funded to press on further with activity centre planning, with most of the documentation now being irrelevant due to drastically changing local commercial realities. Council otherwise had requested other local environmental initiatives of modest cost that are still awaiting manpower funding, and that could, for instance, have major benefits to support increasing home-based working and family living, as well as to the local economy through tourism. Such initiatives are the urban forest planting, particularly in some of the dense and environmentally arid foothill suburbs. Also, active conservation of unique local biodiversity that attracts tourism, as well as climate-related projects. Those should surely have much higher priority for expenditure in the new financial year than yet more theoretical adventures in planning they're not urgently sought by the state government. Regarding avoidable planning expenditure, for example, the District Activity Centre at Forestfield Forum was fully reworked only 2 years ago by initiative of the combined owners and operators, transformed and made much more attractive to residents and therefore economically sustainable, with no involvement whatsoever by city planning staff or engagement by the city of external consultants. Yet planning staff still expect funding to rethink it. Councillors can still find many such excesses in these budget papers to warrant changes in priority and could in fact still achieve some net reduction in rates that is still feasible within the broad definition of freezing rates against 2019-20. Every $50 saved could help a family on the breadline. Many projects that include both capital works and services are listed, perhaps misleadingly as stimulus, when most will be using the council's own existing workforce. We suggest, for instance, delaying or deleting new spend of $2.4 million for Kalamunda Town Centre Haines Street and $2.6 million for Kalamunda Town Centre Upgrade Central Mall, since they will have zero short-term economic benefit for ratepayers and were opposed by many at the time, including by the Kalamunda Chamber of Commerce, which you would have thought would be well worth talking to. Also reducing the 16.4 million extra spend and borrowing on fixed assets that include buildings and infrastructure, again to question how much of that creates new jobs or buys new services under the heading of stimulus. Of course, these measures may not be immediately palatable, but nevertheless, Council, as ultimate decision makers, have a duty to those who elected them to take the wide-ranging current and ongoing community circumstances into very serious consideration. Thank you.
Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr Forrest? Councillor Sewell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, a lot of the issues that Mr Forrest raised this evening, I think can be responded by officers in terms of people who are on the breadline, what opportunity is for them to obtain some COVID relief. And also, I just wanted to seek clarity and make sure that I heard correctly, Mr Forrest. So in terms of tourism, the Ratepayers and Residents Association believes that if we did more tree planting, that would create greater tourism than investment within the city centre. Is that correct?
Sorry, no, I was referring to the further development of local biodiversity in that context.
Through the Chair, could I have a comment from the Development Services regarding all the comments that were raised about activity centre planning and planning within the city? Could you please explain to Mr Forrest our statutory requirements under these particular areas, please, Director?
Through the Chair, thank you for referring the particular statements that Mr Forrest has made. There is no budget allocation in the budget that's before Council this evening for activity centre planning specifically for the Forestfield District Centre. It is proposed that city staff in-house undertake a scoping exercise to determine what is required for future planning in accordance with state planning policy in relation to the Forestfield District Centre, but there is no funding allocated for external consultants or any external studies. I'd be curious as to where Mr Forrest has suggested that money has been allocated, because through the budget process that the city has worked through, no funding has been allocated. So I would like to understand where Mr Forrest has thought that funding is there for the Forestfield District Centre. Notwithstanding the fact that there isn't funding there, the city will be undertaking a scoping exercise because under state planning policy, there is a requirement for an activity centre plan for district centres, of which Forestfield is one, and similarly Kalamunda. the city did embark on a comprehensive planning and consultation process to prepare a activity centre plan for the Kalamunda Activity Centre, District Centre, and before council this evening there are infrastructure projects that are related to that plan being implemented. But as stated, there is no funding specifically for Forestfield, as Mr Forrest has highlighted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask the Director of Assets to comment on the requirement and need for upgrading buildings, assets, roads and other maintenance requirements within the city, please?
Thank you, Madam CEO, and through the Chair. As Council would reflect, we have developed quite a significant and broad-reaching strategic asset management plan in which, under the requirements of local government for having integrated planning and frameworks in place, one of those are asset management plans for all the city's assets. And as we have noted, we have continually developed those, Council endorsed them and determined that we require levels of ongoing funding year on year for maintaining our existing assets by each category to the service standard that was adopted by Council. And that's not taking into account any new assets that come into the portfolio. So these are good asset management practices to have in budgets year on year, funding for renewing and maintaining assets.
Thank you. Through the Chair, if I may, could I ask the Director of Corporate Services to comment on the comments around excessive expenditure, the discretionary spends in our budget and the simplistic approach to revenues equating the same amount as we raised the previous year, please?
Yes, thank you through the Chair. So firstly, thank you for the feedback from the Ratepayers Association. I'd just like to probably bring a couple of numbers to the table. In terms of the city's budgetary process, I think councils have gone through an ad nauseum exercise in the last 12 weeks in which we've been through lots of different modelling scenarios around income, expenditure and capital works programs. We are a relatively complex business. We administer $570 million worth of assets, and associated with those asset classes are ongoing maintenance and renewal requirements. And when you get behind for a couple of years, you've then got to play massive catch up. And we have an obligation not only for current community, but also for future communities to do things in a financially sustainable manner. With respect to some commentary around the rates, I note that in the financial reports you will see that the rate revenue for 1920 compared to 2021 is within $4,000. So we're looking at 37.574 million and 37.578 million. And that reflects Council's commitment and decision to freeze the total rate revenue. In relation to our revenue and expenditure, again, through the budgetary process, the city's acknowledged a write-down in revenue of some $2.3 million. And that's a combination of offering fee assistance and financial assistance to some of our community groups in regards to leases. But on the flip side, in the expenditure space, you will see that our expenditure has been revised downwards from $63.6 million to $55 million, which is a pretty significant $7.7 million shift. And I can only say that that's been the culmination process of a lot of difficult Monday and Tuesday nights that this council and administration has had in trying to set the budget. And going back to the budget itself, so the budget has really been framed around maintaining and ensuring that we look after our assets and don't end up with a big lump at the end of the period. It's been based around delivering savings measures, which I've spoken about, the $7.7 million reduction in expenditure. It's also been about stimulus projects and looking at projects that are going to assist the economy in rebounding and also in job creation. But most importantly, it's also been focused around the establishment of a couple of reserves, but most noticeably the Crisis Relief Fund. So from my perspective, I think it's been a really challenging year, and we certainly acknowledge that for communities it's tough. There's a lot of things, a lot of pressures on the communities, but we feel that we've moved forward with a budget that tries to best balance all those things in an equitable way.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to speak to us. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Forrest, we need to move on. We've got to get through a lot tonight. There are no matters for which the meeting may be closed. Are there any disclosure of interests?
Through the chair, I haven't received any tonight, so obviously the answer is no.
Thank you. So now we move on to reports to Council, and we welcome Councillor Village, who has joined us. The first one is 8.11.
Mayor, Director, weren't you going to give a presentation on the overview of the budget?
We haven't got to that item yet.
Okay, you'll do it then.
Yeah. So the first one is about the differential rating submissions. Are there any questions, councillors? So we have a recommendation on page 12. Do I have a mover? Councillor O'Connor, and a seconder? Councillor Blair, is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Adoption of the budget. This is in 9 parts, councillor. So before we do that, can I get a report from the Director of Corporate Services, and then we'll take the 9 parts separately.
Okay, through the chair, thank you very much for councillors, staff, members of the public. I'm going to take you through an overview of tonight's budget. Our purpose tonight is to adopt a 2021 budget comprised of the municipal budget, agreeing to strike our rates, endorsement of our fees and charges, adoption of our capital works program, and as I've referenced a little earlier, the creation of 2 new cash reserves. I won't dwell on this too much, but a little bit of context. 22,700 odd dwellings, a 349 square kilometre area. I nearly said metre, I wish. Population of about 59,000, and a net asset base of $570 million. And we're no small business in that sense. And going with that is obviously the challenges of trying to maintain contemporary and well-serviced assets. Won't again dwell too much on this, but over the preceding months, as we always do, we've been through a number of workshops with councillors and staff, starting with a strategic retreat in March 2020, which was designed to set the strategic financial direction of the city. And little did we know, a few days later, things changed a little bit. And so we quickly had to regroup and have another workshop to assess what we thought were the initial financial impacts of COVID-19. To Council's credit, we then moved into a special council meeting on the 7th of April 2020, and that was designed to follow the government's directive to maintain and freeze rates revenue, to put a freeze on fees and charges, to look at some potential stimulus projects that we would bring forward for consideration in the budget, which we'll be doing tonight, and also looking at what measures that we could potentially put in place to help our ratepayers, our community groups and our business groups. And again, those aspects are covered off in the Crisis Relief Fund and in the proposed guidelines around those. We then had subsequent meetings during April and May to crunch through all the various components of the budget. So the COVID 2019 special council meeting was focused primarily around three areas: austerity or savings measures, economic stimulus, and building new reserves. It also had as a centrepiece financial hardship policy. So out of the COVID special council meeting, we were gearing our efforts to supporting business to transition to new service and product delivery models. As I say, to provide financial relief to assist in businesses with cash flow problems and to community members, and as I've already mentioned, expenditure savings. So out of all that, we've got to try and put a budget together that meets social and economic needs, provides assistance to financial hardship cases, and also responding to the state government's call for local government to take a leadership role in assisting the community. And a couple of the key elements in that request from the state government were based around freezing rates revenue, freezing our fees and charges, and also maintaining staff and not sacking large numbers of staff. If we go into the actual budget position, so our overall rates revenue remains largely the same, and that's referenced in the rate setting statement. The fees and charges are also largely the same. We have a capital works program of 38.3 million, and before I hear gulps from elected members, that incorporates the the requested capital works program for 2021, plus carried over capital works projects from the prior year. We projected a surplus, a modest one at that, of $133,918, and at the same time maintaining our reserve balances around about $8.5 million. As I mentioned earlier, our operating income has come down 2.3 million, and in response to that we've reduced expenditure to by 7.7 million. Central to that has really been the focus on going back to those projects, services that are absolutely mission critical services, and looking at those projects with a discretionary spend, and where we could removing those discretionary spends altogether, or at least reducing them substantively. In response to that, we're asking Council tonight to consider adopting a service reinstatement reserve with a $1 million element to it, with the view of, as we start to stand up services and facilities as we post-COVID, that we can go back and source some of the money that we'd taken out previously to give a bit of seed money to those projects. And also looking at borrowings of a little over new borrowings of a little over $3 million. And I'm going to talk about the borrowings a little bit more later. Suffice to say, the current climate for borrowing is a very good one. Interest rates are at record lows, and to give you an idea, we're getting 10-year fixed loans on large infrastructure projects in and around 1.24%. So that's a 10-year fixed rate, and certainly it's quite an attractive option for the city, albeit we still need to be prudent in our use of borrowings, because we need to be focused not just on today but future generations, and have capacity to be able to respond in future years. So we certainly don't want to be in a space where we max out our borrowings. This next slide provides an overview of the operating budget 2021. On the left-hand side is operating revenues by nature or type, and what you can see there is we are rate dependent. 69% of our income comes from rates, 27% of our income comes from fees and charges. And then on the expenditure side, you can see that 43% of our expenditure is relating to employee costs and 32% to materials and contracts, and then 20% for depreciation, which is albeit a non-cash item. So in terms of our capital works program for 2021, we're looking at 28% of the spend in the area of land and buildings, closely followed by roads, 27%. I might add that with the road projects, many of those have grant funding attached, so you will have seen around the road signs, black spot funding, roads to recovery, so we typically attract grants in those areas. Parks and ovals, 18%, and car parks and other infrastructure, 11%, and then there's some smaller amounts in the other areas. So we had identified some stimulus projects, and those stimulus projects were designed in order to support economic recovery and jobs. Also to be funded where we could out of reserves, grants or cash in lieu funding, so thereby minimising the draw on municipal funds as much as we possibly could, and then making some strategic use of borrowings, which I spoke about a little earlier. So in terms of the overall budget, so this is a composite view of the capital works and the operating budgets, and this pie chart illustrates where our funding sources come from. So if you look at, you'll see 62% of our total funding source for CapEx and OpEx actually comes from municipal or rates funding, okay? We then have, looking at the percentage, it's not reading that percentage very well, the red one. 13% on grants, subsidies and contributions, sorry about that. And then 10% reserves, and then we've got a smattering of capital developer contributions. So again, municipal funding and also operating grants and subsidies make the lion's share of where that source of funds comes from, okay? So moving across to rate setting, and I'm sure that this is pretty topical to us all, and certainly our community. Every year, every 3 years, thankfully it's not every year, every 3 years Landgate do revaluations of our properties, and unfortunately in this year the new gross rental values were issued on the 22nd of April 2020, and that was despite a request from the city to the state government to defer the GRV revaluation, and we unfortunately were unsuccessful in that space, and as a consequence the overall value for city properties fell by 8.7%. But not all properties perform the same as the market. So I think during the course of the budget workshops we've had quite a few conversations about trying to explain how rates are actually calculated, and we're certainly planning to provide some really good communication to go out with the rates notices outlining the rates calculation process. Welga has certainly tried to get on the front foot also and inform communities in this space. So basically how are rates calculated? So all our property values are put together, and the property values are determined by the Valuer General and multiplied by a rate in the dollar. And so if we could use as a fairly simple example, so the starting premise is to work what your budget deficit equates to without rates. So if you're an organisation that has total revenue of $1 million and you have total expenditure of $5 million, then you have a budget deficit of $4 million. if we were to assume that the total valuations of all the properties were $40 million, then the rate in the dollar is simply the $4 million divided by the $40 million. So we end up with a rate in the dollar of 0.10. So if we go through the various categories of GRV and the industrial, commercial and vacant changes, what we can see is that GRV general went down by 13.1% on average, industrial commercial by 8.1%, vacants by 1%, and UV general by 0.3%. So the fun bit comes to explain how does this actually play out in people's rates notices. So again, we've tried to keep it fairly simple. So if we look at scenario A, Ms A, and their property devalues by 13.1%, which is exactly the same percentage as the average, then their rates would stay the same in 1920 as they were the prior year. Second one is Mr B. His property devalues at less than the 13.1%, so it might be 10, it might be 9, some number less than 13.1, then his rates will increase in 1920. And then scenario C is that Mr C devalues property devalues by more than 13.1%. His rates will be lower than in 1920. So these are going to be some of the many challenges that our staff are going to be faced with, and I'm sure councillors will have members of the community come to them and say, hey, what's going on here? And so our role in all of this is to make sure we're right on the front foot in terms of education and information. There's no smoke and mirrors, there's no magic wands, it is what it is, and we need to work through that, and I think it really is about that education piece. So in terms of you heard me speak about the rate in the dollar. Interestingly, we've done a grab of all the other rate in the dollar calcs for 1920, because obviously we haven't got a lot of the 2020 ones because they're not released them yet, their budgets haven't been adopted. And last year we were 11% below the metro average for residential, 9% below for commercial industrial, and 23% below for vacant land. You've only got a snapshot there of a handful of councils because it would have been way too busy for you to read with 30 odd councils in there. But what that's telling us is that we stack up fairly favourably in relation to the rate in the dollars that we've got set against the other LGs. So I guess glass half full, glass half empty when it comes to the budget. Certainly we've had some significant challenges. We expect that cash flow is going to be a significant challenge for the City of Kalamunda. We believe that certainly in the first quarter or so, we're going to need to make every dollar a prisoner, and we're certainly going to be working really hard to get as much revenue in as we can, but equally keep a good restraint over expenditure. But as I said, on the flip side of the equation, there are some opportunities too, and those opportunities are that we've got record low interest rates, so we've got some capacity to borrow. The other things in there is that the state government has also indicated that they're willing to support a short-term funding facility, so we've got potentially access to those areas. We've been fortunate enough in preceding years that preceding council budget deliberations have enabled us to maintain a reasonable level of reserves. It's modest, but it's at least helped us out, and hence another reason why we try and push on to keep some buffer in the bank, and hopefully next year or the year after we're not faced with a COVID-21 or a COVID-22, and we've got some capacity and a bit of wriggle room. The other opportunities are in the economic stimulus areas, and certainly for Rhonda and the Mayor, I'm sure they will be beating lots of doors down at state and federal parliament, trying to get our hands on money for key projects. Two new reserves we've created: the Crisis Relief Fund, which is to provide a safety net for those community groups in demonstrable financial hardship, and that item's for consideration later on in terms of the guidelines and how that'll apply, and the Service Reinstatement Reserve, which I've already talked about. The other thing I draw to your attention is that we are recommending some changes in the use of reserves. So you will recall during budget deliberations that we have are recommending to shift some funds from the Land Property Enhancement Reserve, the EDPIT Reserve, the Insurance Reserve and the Asset Reval Reserve into the Asset Enhancement Reserve to help fund our capital works projects. Borrowings proposed for 2021 I've referenced, so just over $3 million, and again the rates on those loans are fixed for 10 years, and we've identified there the sorts of projects that are lined up against those particular borrowings. So how do we adopt a budget without all the answers? Yeah, it's been tricky, and I guess the one message that we've got to keep by is that we need to be agile, we need to be flexible. We've tried to balance all aspects, zero increase in rate revenue, savings and expenditure budget, some stimulus projects. But what we do know is that from 1 July, from tomorrow, the finance team are going to be monitoring cash flow very closely, and we're going to be coming back to council probably on many occasions during the course of the year to walk through budget reviews. It's inevitable, and it'll be really nice if I'm coming back with great news to say, guys, things are going a whole lot better than we actually projected in the budget, and we've got more money to either put into reserves or to float other projects. But conversely, it could go the other way as well. But certainly our modelling and our assumptions we think are reasonable. So in summary, this budget is designed to deliver strategies that have been set by council, the art strategy, econ dev, tourism, to maintain high levels of services across the programs, to allocate funding to the Crisis Relief Reserve, to maintain the same level of rate revenue, but really importantly, to operate in a financially sustainable manner during what's been a pretty tough time. And so in closing, I'd just like to thank everyone here tonight, staff, councillors, for what you've given up over the last ultimate weeks, having to go through these various iterations, and anyone who says building a budget in 2021 COVID is easy, I'd like to see it. Come and have a go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. Councillors, you've got a 75-page budget there. I know we've all had many meetings, we've asked lots of questions. I am giving you the opportunity, before we move on to the budget recommendations, are there any questions you wish to ask of the Director? No, well, we'll move on to part 1, which is on page 25, which is the elected members' fees and allowances. Do I have a mover? Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Part 2, schedule of general fees and charges. Your officer recommendation is on page 26. Are there any questions, councillors? If not, could I ask for a mover? Councillor Ritchie, seconded by Councillor Cooper. If there's not going to be any debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Part 3, other statutory fees. We're on page 28. Are there any questions? I'll ask for a mover for part 3. Councillor Sewell, seconded by Councillor Boyd. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Part 4. Is on page 29. This is the start of the stimulus projects. Do I have a mover for...
Madam Chair, if I may, I would just like to say that I had proposed an amendment
Yes.
to this item tonight regarding a specified area rate.
Yes.
And I was advised that this item can come to council in its own right, and the Kalamunda Town Centre would be included in the report. So on that advice, I did withdraw my amendment. Just
Thank you,
wanted that on
Councillor.
record.
Thank you, Councillor Billich. So we've got the motion on page 29. Do I have a mover? Councillor Jardina, and seconded by Councillor Sewell. Is there going to be any debate? Okay, I'll ask the mover to... Oh, is there a question? Yes. Sorry, I thought you were talking about debate.
Can we just clarify what are we moving, because there's an and and an or, and I think it needs to be clarified what we're actually moving, please.
So
You're moving the projects for either the Haines Street or the Central Mall, which is still yet to be decided which one. Council has not selected which of those streetscapes will go first, because we are still working on detailed designs. So once we have detailed designs and tender, we'll be bringing those reports back to get a final decision on which particular project will go forward.
thank you. I go to the mover,
I
Councillor...
have a question.
Yes, Councillor Billich.
In part B, where it says Haines Street and or Central Mall construction to commence as one project in 2020-21 and to be completed in 21-22. And then in point C, obviously, it says that note for funding for these works continuing into 21-22 will be determined as part of the 21-22 budget deliberations. My question is that when I read that, that is telling me that this is preempting our budget deliberations for next year. So to me, I find that rather misleading. That's how I read it.
So go on.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that point B, really, I think that by saying that they are commencing as one project and is going to be completed in 21-22.
So your question is?
My question is that I think that's incorrect.
Through the chair, through the budget deliberations, we discussed this at length, and the concept was to develop the detailed designs for Haines Street, which we've done, to go on and develop detailed designs for Central. So therefore we could put out a tender, and if you put out a tender for both projects, then you're going to most likely get some economies of scale and a much better tender price than separating them. So that was what we were working towards. And knowing that, you know, we do have these two projects in the pipeline, but we would allocate the second lot of funding because this project will take 2 years it will cross over 2 financial years. Director, is that correct? Would you like to add, Director of Assets?
Thank you. Through the chair, yeah, obviously the greater guidance I've got tonight as to which projects proceed to construction in next year's budget gives me certainty how to complete the program. My understanding was that the decision tonight was to try and identify one or both projects to proceed to construction tender. If that's not the case, then I am mistaken and sorry for that, but just to back up what the CEO said, yes, there's obviously much better economies of cost and construction costs if they're bundled up as one project. There also makes it a much better end product because it's seamless. You're flowing the works from one area into the next, so the construction joint where the two projects butt up to each other doesn't exist, and it's a much better outcome from a construction purpose. If council are disposed tonight to identify which one or both are to be proceeding, that would be wonderful news just for certainty, but if however council wish to just identify money and then make a decision which road it is at a later date, that's equally workable.
Thank you, Director. I'll now go to the mover, Councillor Giardina.
Sorry, can I ask a question as well? Looking at the comments, I can see where that comment's coming through. In section B, it says that Haines Street and Central Mall construction commences one project in 2021 and be completed in 21-22. But the next one says, note that the funding for work continuing to 21-22 will be determined. I'm wondering if it's just the wording that's caused that slight issue in B, that's all. I thought, because can we and are we allowed to, as a council, to preempt what's going to be into the budget of 21-22?
Through the chair, you're noting that funding works. It's noting, you're not preempting a budget, you're not approving that, you're just noting that that will be part of next year's budget.
Just a question, Madam, you got a question?
No, you're right.
Okay. The 2.4 million, does that cover both projects?
No.
Just the one?
No, that's one.
Oh,
so
that's what we're doing.
That's what you're doing.
That's what it
you're
says here,
approving 2.4 million to be spent in this financial year.
That's what we're doing.
Whether it's Haines Street or Central, we're yet to understand which one you want to go first.
Okay. No, well, look, here I'm looking at Haines Street first. That's the largest one. I know there's more work to be done through Central Mall, but I think Haines Street is the way to go, followed by, if council sees fit next year, next budget deliberations.
Thank you, Councillor Gina. Just before I go to you as the mover, Councillor O'Connor, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, I think we just need to tidy up that recommendation, because if it is the will of the mover to go down the Haines Street path, I think we just need to clear that wording up. You can't bind a future budget process at this budget process. The tender documents could be worded such that they have separate proportions, and they could be tendered as such, which still does, which we could get the economies of scale, but we're not binding a council to that commitment.
I just want to add that I don't find this confusing at all. It's we're going to put 2.4 million in, and then it doesn't matter which street goes first, it's 2.4 million. And while I don't find it confusing, I'm happy for the mover to make the comment.
Could I make a comment? Could I please ask a question? I think, though, what is probably the most misleading part in this really is the bit where it says, and be completed in 21-22. I think that is the part that is actually confusing it and muddying the water there, because by that wording, we are in essence preempting, from my point of view, the budget deliberations.
Would you like to change that with the intention of completing?
I don't think it actually even needs to be in there, to be honest. I think that's all.
Point C?
I think that, personally, I think it should be, you know, you can leave B in there, but just remove the and be completed in 21-22. I think that may cover it. But I'm open to other councillors' comments.
I will go to the mover and see what the mover thinks.
Look, I'm happy to, as long as we've got Haines Street in there with a 2.4 million, that's what we're looking at. As long as we've got enough money to cover Haines Street, that's what I'm looking for. The rest of it, you can do whatever you want with it. And I'll seek some guidance from the officers to tidy that up so there's no ambiguity moving forward.
So if council is happy to leave Haines Street, then we can remove the and/or Central Mall. We can delete B, and we can delete C. That's all we need then.
Okay.
A. Is that correct, Director? Asset, we can work with that.
As you set it out, acting CEO. That's correct. Yeah, if we make a decision tonight to proceed to Haines, decision A only is the only one that needs to be debated and adopted.
Are you happy with that, Demover?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll go to you, Councillor Giardina. One more question, Councillor Ritchie.
I would just like some debate about the Haines Street versus the mall, because I'm not very happy about Haines Street going first. So I don't know where that leads us, but I think there's a case to be mounted both ways.
Maybe you'd like to suspend standing orders for a moment and have a discussion about this topic.
Can I have a mover to suspend standing orders?
Could be specific about the suspension of standing orders and only suspend clauses 10.7 and 10.8, which will allow us to have the open discussion but retain the benefit of the rest of the standing orders for control purposes.
Thank you. So, councillors, do you wish to do this? Or do you wish to move on with just Haines Street? I'll be guided by you.
Madam Chair, look, the reason why I've asked for Haines Street, because I've been on council for 30 years, and most of that time it's been Haines Street that we've been requested. Most of that time, Central Mall has come in over the last couple of years since we've gone out for for public comment. That has been added to it. So that's why I keep on saying Haines Street, and if council wants to move into Central Mall, and I know that there's a lot of people that do want that also, business people. So I think first things first, we'll start with Haines Street. That's the biggest chunk, and move into Central Mall if council wants to go that way.
If I could just take some advice. So, let's go with Haines Street. If that's defeated, we can go with Central Mall. And if that's defeated, we'll see where we go from there. Are you happy with that, Councillor Ritchie?
Yeah, I don't want us to be at conflict about this. I just think there's a case to be put both ways. I can exactly see what Councillor Giordano is talking about, but I'd like to put the case the other way. But I don't want it to be, I think people would like to hear both sides, before we vote one down. It might be if we voted one down and then people put better arguments, we might go the other way again. So it was more about that notion, just having a bit of a discussion, I suppose.
So then you do need to suspend standing
Let's
orders
have a mover to suspend
and have an open discussion.
Standing orders. Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Giardina. We can now have an open discussion. Oh, we need to vote. All those in favour of suspending standing orders? We just want the two clauses suspended as advised by General Counsel. So that's carried unanimously. We'll go to discussion. Councillor Ritchie, do you want to lead this off?
Yeah, look, I can make a case for both of them. I guess I'm thinking more about bang for buck. And the mall, at the end of the day, Haines Street's still going to be a road. And it's going to have road, and it's going to have parking, and it's going to have some seating and so on. But the mall, to me, is a really exciting prospect of creating something which is going to have a completely different feel about it. I think it's going to have a fabulous opportunity to attract music festivals as well as our ongoing markets and so on, particularly in light of our tourism and our art strategy. I can see some public art in there. I can certainly see areas where you could actually attract people up on weekends. So while I have no problem with Haines Street, it's more about what would be more likely to attract not just local people, but also people coming into the city to complement both our tourist and our art strategies.
Who else would like to speak? Councillor Stallard.
Oh,
sorry.
Yes, thank you. I've always felt divided on this one, but to a certain degree, you stop and think about the Haines Street. We did a cross patchwork of repairs and things. The footpaths are fairly uneven. There's not really an appeal, and people coming here. the Central Mall is more catering for outside, but we really need to look at appeasing or working towards the local businesses to one degree, but certainly for all of us who use that area, whether it's walking around, the elderly and so on, up and down that street area. It's uneven, the area's divided up, it's just not a good feel, a good walk or a good image, and we cannot attract as many, or we cannot attract people in as much if you haven't got a good main street. And that main street is degraded, it's aged, and it just has no appeal. So it's no good having an aged and tired main street and having a nice looking mall. You've got to get them to come past the street to go to the mall. So I think one and then the other.
Thank you. Councillor Sewell, can I just get a comment from the Director of Asset Services and the Director of Planning before we continue?
Thank you. Through the Chair, one of the issues when we do look at the funding for these projects, Haines or Central, is at the moment the city has collected $350,000 of cash in lieu for parking provisions for developers on Central Mall. That can be applied, it can only be applied to provide new car bays. And the Central Mall concept does incorporate provision of new car bays. It can't be used for Haines. So there is perhaps a consideration to be made that of the Central Mall budget, $350,000 is already provided for through a reserve that exists.
Thank you. Director?
Through the Chair, adequately covered by the Director of Assets. No further comment.
Thank you. So I'll go...
Can I just have a question answered, Madam Chair? How far have we progressed with the detailed drawings for Central Lane?
Director of Assets
Thank
Services.
you. Through the Chair, as Council agreed, this current financial year, which expires in a few hours, we were able to appoint our design team for Central Mall. They have just recently commenced work. Their program indicates that, all going well, a Central Mall concept design would be available mid-August for Council review at a strategy session, and then continuing on through consultation and construction design, we would be ready to go to tender around Christmas time if everything went straight to program.
Councillors, this is an unusual thing to do. I'm not asking you to vote on whether you're going to approve this in the budget. I'm just going to ask you whether you're going for Central or Haines to allow our mover and seconder to get an idea of how councillors feel. So I've got Councillor Ritchie with Central and Councillor Stallard with Haines. No, I am coming to you, Councillor Sewell. So think about that. We'll take Councillor Sewell's question and then I'm going to ask you to pick one or the other. Councillor Sewell.
I remember that the Director of Development Services did provide us with a briefing and the visual elements associated with both of those works. I'm wondering if that is publicly available and whether we can revisit that tonight if we're having to make this decision. I think it would be good for us to refresh that information and put it on the public, within the public arena, if that's possible.
Is that possible?
Through the Chair, yes it is, and I can organise that information to be sent to our minute taker and for some of that to be brought on the screen if through the Chair and the CEO that's seen as acceptable.
Yes, absolutely. At this point it is a public document. We've put it out for advertising. It's come back from advertising, so it's on our website.
So should we take a 5-minute break for that? Yeah. Councillors, we'll have a 5-minute break and this is what we're going to do. We're going to get those plans put up so we can see them again, and then I'm going to do, while we're still under suspension of standing orders, just get a feel, and then I will go back to the mover and seconder, who will then have some idea what councillors are thinking. So, 5-minute break. between the two.
Through the chair, assume we've resumed, Mayor?
We're still in suspension of standing orders, but if you would like to give us this quick.
No problems. Minute taker, would you mind going to page 26 of the PDF? This is the city's landscape master plan that was prepared as part of the activity centre plan for Kalamunda, and this set the vision and the tone for the subsequent detailed designs and construction drawings and implementation program for the activity centre. On the screen before council is the Main Street design, Haines Street, which is envisaged through the landscape master plan, and this sets out what the program is in terms of a concept for what Haines Street may look like, which looks at the opportunities and describes what Haines Street is in the context of the Kalamunda Activity Centre. And Haines Street's the traditional retail core of the town centre and still functions as a significant destination. There are a number of interesting and attractive retail offerings along the length that public realm improvements would support. Haines Street also attracts as a connector from Stirk Park, the proposed Barber Street Piazza and Central Lane to bring the Heritage and Civic Precinct on and connect this Heritage and Civic Precinct on Railway Road. There's many opportunity along Haines Street for reduced road pavement widths to provide for a more enhanced pedestrian environment, maintain the framed view along Haines Street between Canning Road and Railway Road, remove curbs and provide for pedestrian-friendly environments conducive to retail and event activities. There's a number of other opportunities that are shown on the screen which are there for the benefit of council, but nonetheless it is proposed and improved Main Street with streetscape enhancements including additional canopy cover, pavement treatments and the like. There has been detailed concepts progressed for Haines Street, and the Director of Assets may wish to discuss some of the details of those and some of the key features.
Thank you. Through the Chair, thank you, Director. As Council may recall, we have progressed Haines Street design before we engaged the team for Central, so the Haines Street design has got a lot further down the track. The concept plan was provided to Council at a strategy session late last year. So we're now in the process of just integrating with the landscape architects' views, as you see here, those sorts of things, with the civil engineer's ability to make the road work from a drainage perspective and other cross sections, so that the landscape master plan can be realised. So that progress of integration is just about complete. That will then allow the city's team to sign off on the plans, and that will then go into the construction tender documentation phase with detailed designs and detailed specifications for the works. What we can say at this point in time, the development has demonstrated that we can meet these objectives set out in the landscape master plan. Moreover, we are able, through what's called friction, and friction means how you set out your street furniture, your paving, your surface treatments, etc. It naturally lends itself to a low-speed, mixed-use pedestrian and traffic environment, so that we can target at least a posted speed limit of no higher than 40 km an hour for Haines Street to get the objective off the ground of having this as a pedestrian-friendly precinct. So that's working quite well at the moment, and we're just finishing off the details of how Barber Street and Central integrate into this layout plan.
Thank you. Director of Development Services, do you want to give us a quick Central Mall
summary?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Summary?
No problems. Through the Chair. Minute taker, would you mind going to page 30 of the document? This was a key feature and noteworthy initiative outlined within the Kalamunda Activity Centre Plan and Landscape Master Plan was Central Lane, currently known as Central Mall. The idea of opening Central Mall to one-way traffic was posed as part of the Activity Centre Plan, and mixed views and opinions were put forward by the community as part of that. From an urban design and activity centres planning perspective, Central Mall in its current format doesn't have the right recipe for a mall style environment. Hay Street Mall and Murray Street Mall in the city are successful malls, and they're successful malls because of a couple of key ingredients, and they are that there's a significant resident population in the city, that is people that live in the city centre, and there's a significant employment resident population in the city, that is a high number of people coming to work there during business hours. Kalamunda isn't of the scale of the city's CBD. It doesn't have those key ingredients, and as such we've got Central Mall in its current format, which other than on market days is got low pedestrian numbers walking through it, and the businesses and the like don't have the same sort of exposure to the foot traffic that they do in other successful malls. The ingredients are simply not there. So in that context, and looking back at Central Lane or Central Road as it was in the 1980s, it was quite a vibrant environment based on the era of photography that I've viewed, and some of the councillors here would no doubt remember when Central Road was actually a two-way street. We've looked back at those historical elements, looked at the ingredients of a successful mall, and decided that it was appropriate to put within the activity centre plan the opening of Central Mall to Central Lane to enable activation, to enable opportunities for drop-down areas and the like, and to activate the lane. So in that context, the landscape master plan looked at opportunities for reactivating Central Lane and having it as a one-way street, with the direction of that one-way street to be determined through the detailed design process. So before you on the screen is what the vision is for Central Lane through the landscape master plan, and that Central Lane will become the heart of Kalamunda's nighttime economy, delivering an intimate and vibrant urban experience that supports both day and nighttime activities and acts as a centre point or a counterpoint to the more traditional and heritage spaces of the town centre. So this was to really breathe a new, fresh bit of life into Kalamunda's town centre and a contemporary urban design outcome through Central Lane. One of the key elements that we've worked through during the advertising process was that any detailed design that does occur for Central Lane, is to be conducive so it can be closed readily and easily for the opportunities like the markets. So that's a key feature that's been taken on board by Brett and the assets team, that this can be easily closed for markets and events, but also readily opened for one-way traffic and the activation in the centre of the city. So there's some key features there on the screen, which I might pause for a moment to allow councillors to absorb, and there's a legend there. But some of the key elements are some canopy covers and markings on Central Lane. Is it canopy lighting? Is that what it's referred? Canopy lighting and the like. And you know, the idea is shown on this catenary lighting. The idea is shown on this concept. The detail is to come through the design process.
Thank you, Director of Asset Services. Do you wish to add anything about Central Lane?
Thank you. Through the Chair, of course, as I did speak to earlier, the design team for Central is a different design team for Haines, so they've just started their work, so they're a little bit further behind than the Haines project. But if a decision's made it's when we call tenders for this project, do we call tenders with separate proportions for one or both roads, I will suspend the complete, well, no, I won't go to tender as soon as Haines finished. In other words, we get both of them finished in design, then we go to tender. Or if the disposition of the council is that we just focus on Haines in this budget, I can get out to tender much quicker.
Thank you. So, councillors, I'm not asking you to vote on whether this is approved in the budget. I'm just asking you, if you did pick one before the other, which would it be? So who would do Haines first?
I would go with the Haines because we've got money. There's some funds for the Central Lane, apparently. We can probably use that until we can, but Haines is my preferred option at this point in time.
Councillor Sewell? Haines? Councillor Boyd? Councillor Cannon? Councillor O'Donnell? Councillor Billich? Councillor Blair? Councillor Cooper? Councillor O'Connor?
Central.
Councillor Ritchie? Did anyone keep a tab? I would probably go Central.
Then it's 6-6. Jeff went Central.
No, Jeff went Haines. Jeff was Haines.
Oh, yeah, Haines, oh, 7-5 then to Haines. No, 6-6, sorry. If you went Haines, it was 6-6. So we've got 1 Central, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, Dylan. 6-6, so there you go.
No, it's not 6-6 because Sue didn't vote.
Yep, I didn't. Okay, so it's 6 for Central and 5 for Haines then.
You have to vote.
No, she doesn't.
No, yeah, no, this is just to have an idea.
So,
Sorry, can I ask a question then? As I was talking, so my understanding was that if we did vote, we look at reducing the cost, that there would be some budgetary savings if we undertook both projects at the same time.
That's correct. There would be every expectation in a construction contract, if there was a much larger book of works that were continuous, then there would be savings per rate compared to then separating the projects over some period of time and having independent contracts.
However, is it my understanding that we need to do one before the other?
What we will determine through the detailed design process, if we have certainty around what's being built, one road or 2 roads, the constructability program would then be determined. That will guide us. I'll be working geographically in a different pattern as to separate roads, or we are focusing on one road. It is really working through how I will then be able to construct the project. As a Haines and Central project is a different construction to a Haines only or a Central only. I have to address how I can best build it for minimum disruption to business owners. That's the major issue I've got to contend with.
Okay, so I'm going to the mover and asking the mover, we still haven't gone back to the proper meeting. I'm just going to ask the mover, knowing that more people wanted Central, are you still willing to move Central?
Chair, look, I came in this evening with a view of, and I've known all along that Haines Street was the one that needed to be done.
Okay.
And secondly,
so you still wish to move Haines?
And Central would have come on stream after that. Tonight, Councillor Ritchie's thrown a spanner in the works there. But look, it is what it is. I know both have to be done, and I certainly don't want, because I'm pushing for Haines, that I'm going to lose one or the other. So I think that I will go wherever the majority is and just get on with it.
Well done. So can I have a mover that we move back into the proper meeting? Councillor Blair, seconded by Councillor Sewell. All those in favour? So we are moving on now, and I'll go to the mover and...
We'll just update the recommendation and change it back to Central.
Yes, Councillor Sewell.
So when we had these discussions previously, in our many budgetary discussions, they were always discussed jointly, so that both of these joint projects would essentially be undertaken at the same time, so that we could get the disruption over and done with, and we could get value for money, and it was very much an integrated plan. What we're discussing now seems to have moved significantly away from that.
So you're not happy to second for Central?
I'm not happy to second the motion in its current form. My understanding was that both of those projects, the discussion was always around both of those projects.
I understand that too, but the money that we've put in for this project doesn't cover both the streets, so we can only do one this year and one next year. Do you understand that, Councillor Sewell? So bearing in mind that most councillors wanted central, would you like to think about that for us? Help us move forward.
I can also see the benefit that it would provide in terms of creating a hub and some hope and some life within Kalamunda. And also, you know, as we return to some level of normality post-COVID, it would probably be the right location for that to occur. So I understand there's some benefit to that.
I commend you for taking that stance. So now I'm going to the mover. Councillor Giardina, we finally got there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, first of all, I just want to commend staff and councillors to getting where we are with this budget. And it's been an unusual budget, not an easy one. And with COVID-19, you know, we're not out of the woods yet. And but you know, this council has demonstrated that even with the issues that we have out there with this pandemic, which you know we've been quite lucky so far, keep our fingers crossed, but we are still moving forward and working as a government. That is very important to me, that we can demonstrate that, and we have demonstrated that to date with some of the stimulus monies that we're putting forward here, whether it's helping our communities, helping putting these projects together, doing some, doing some borrowings, asking for some borrowings at a very cheap rate, I might add. They say out of some of these disasters or pandemics, some opportunities do come out. And this is one of them, where money is very cheap at the moment. And it gives us an opportunity to do some work around the town centre, and I hear that the town centre's been going since 1870. That's when it came to fruition. Madam Chair, pull me up if I'm going over my time with the second that needs to speak. It's been up since 1870. And councillors, cast your mind back, how much money really has been spent in the town centre. I've been on council for 30 years. And you can count the amount of jobs or little projects that we've actually done within that area. And I'm not talking about Central Lane, I'm talking about Haines Street in general, how much works we have done. Very little, very little. And it's always been piecemeal. It's always been band-aid treatments. Let's not forget, we are councillors for the whole city, not our own wards. That is paramount in our decision-making as councillors. First of all, the other thing too is that when we look at these projects, you know, we can say, look, we're going to scale back here, be skimpy here, skimpy there, and not, you know, cut back on everything. But eventually catches up with us. Those days are gone where we can just go in and, you know, do band-aid treatments here and there. We just can't do that anymore. The community's got expectations out there, whether it's up the hill, down the hill. They expect us to carry out some good projects, decent projects, and rightly so. They pay rates and they expect that we do a pretty good job. And look, we've got a lot of work in the budget this year for High Wycombe. You know, fantastic stuff's coming down there in High Wycombe, Forestville North. Well, High Wycombe, it is now. I heard the other day that it finally come through. But we've got a lot of projects on stream that are coming through, and good on this council. We are doing some good work out there, and we're not taking a back seat because of the COVID-19. We've actually worked within the government framework. We've done that. We've been successful at that. We've had some good staff that have been looking at those areas for us and kept everybody in check so far. So, you know, I feel pretty confident that we've got a good budget ahead of us this year, and I commend our officers for doing what they've done so far. And council, we have had a lot of sleepless nights, I have, regarding this particular budget this time round. I know it's different, and the beauty of it is that it's flexible. And if we do get into some strife, we can come back again and revisit it. You know, 3 or 4 times if we need to. Our Director of Finance has made that abundantly clear this evening. We may have to come back 2 or 3 times to revisit some of the work that we're doing, and so be it. But we are carrying on as a government, doing the work that we need to be doing, and there's a fair bit of stimulus monies out there that we're going to be using to make sure that we're putting that into effect. So I hope the council will go down the path of covering or accepting, adopting the whole budget as it is this evening, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I thank Councillor Sewell for being flexible and ask her to speak as the seconder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something I observed over COVID, particularly in the lockdown period, was what the absence of community looked like. So I would drive to work because I was an essential worker and I would not encounter a single soul on the road. I would enter a building while I was the only person within that building and I would not see anyone, no one would come in. And that captured the essence of what a lack of community looks like. What I see in this proposal in terms of Central Mall is the opposite of that. It's about life, it's about celebration, and it's about hope for our community. And I think at the moment, we have a responsibility to create that for our community. And I think this is a really great opportunity for us to do that. And I can see the lights and having the night markets out there. I can see artists doing what they do best. I can see performances and I can see a celebration of our community, and I really look forward to this work being undertaken.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion. Question, Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, sorry to be pedantic. Just wondering, I was flicking to the right page in my budget paper and I didn't realise before Councillor Giardina started talking. Given that this project hasn't been costed yet, the 2.4 I know was costed for Haines, so that's why we had 2.4 listed there. Do we need to write something there to say indicative figure, just to cover us, just in case?
No, it's a budget. These are all indicative figures.
That's fine.
If you look at the change rooms and those other things, they're all in the same boat.
Sure,
we have to do our work.
I just want to make sure
and
we
we'll
don't
bring
want to
that
end up with
back.
a project that was 2.7.
We'll bring back detail through reports and nail it down. Right now, budget is the budget, so it's flexible.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few comments. The cost-benefit analysis has not been defined and this project should not be supported. I attended a meeting at the Vault restaurant in July last year with around 40 local business owners and residents, including Councillor Giardina. The purpose was to discuss the town centre improvement plan, and a common comment was that the plan was too big and too much. There was a sense that there didn't need to be drastic changes and that some efforts in specific areas such as activating spaces, beautifying pathways, better signage, etc. would make a big difference. I don't recall there being a call to rip up and completely rebuild Haines Street and Central Mall. That night it was recognised that the city has no control over the shopfront investments held under private ownership, and that without a community-driven process any plan was sure to fail. In considering the parking, the Kalamunda Activity Centre Plan Transport Assessment by SLR on March 2019 states that reductions in the rate of supply for parking should be adopted to promote both sustainable travel choices and an improved urban design outcome. The car parking study in 2011 was commissioned to undertake a study within the Kalamunda Town Centre with a view to develop a strategy to manage parking provision, with the key findings being parking demand generally well below the number of bays provided on private and public land. Local planning scheme number 3, parking standards were considered likely to be conservative by overestimating actual demand. And if the Kalamunda Town Centre were to be developed to full potential, there may be a requirement to facilitate additional public parking. So which one is it? Isn't it the intention to reach the full potential? And we propose to reduce convenient parking by 30% in the activity centre plan. I don't agree that more people will use the shops in the future, especially if you make it harder for people to drive there, park their car and get to the shops that they want to visit. If it's not convenient, they will go to a district centre that has more choice and more to offer. In reviewing the draft activity centre plan community feedback, one of the first comments I noticed was someone who said they wanted a small country town set around pleasant garden surrounds. So I don't know how that's going to help struggling businesses. one of the common themes is people like the small town feel. So we either invest in rebuilding and try and activate the place and potentially damage that feel, or we leave it as it is. In considering what has happened in recent years and the changes taking place in the traditional retail sector, the Activity Centre strategy, April 2020, states that shifts in consumer preferences and the emergence of online shopping will continue to erode the need for traditional store-based retail and change the types of job roles required in retail. Throughout Australia, online shopping enables consumers to access goods and services from across the globe rather than being reliant on local retailers, which will negatively impact on the demand in the city's retail industry. This seems like a logical statement to me, but there is almost no response from the businesses to this trend. The Activity Centre's strategy, Retail and Commercial Demand Analysis from 2019 discusses the retail gravity model in depth, and this is a kind of activity centre viability model. The model uses an equation that considers mainly three factors, that being the size of the activity centre, the travel time to the activity centre, and the population zones in and around the activity centre. Worth noting is that the Forestfield and Kalamunda district centres are projected to have the same floor space by 2036. However, according to Forecast ID, the city's own population projection data, the population is expected to grow in the Forestfield catchment alone by nearly 3,000 people, and this doesn't include the 6,800 residents in the High Wycombe South precinct. Conversely, the Kalamunda's population is expected to grow by a maximum of 1,200 people, with little to no increase in other hill suburbs. I'm not confident that enough analysis has been done on the types of business offerings available in the Kalamunda town site. It appears to me that the clientele catchment that the town site once enjoyed is going to activity centres that are easier to access in terms of parking and that offer more choice of products and services. I'm not seeing the agile and responsive businesses popping up in Haines Street or Central Mall. And we've heard from Mr Forrest earlier tonight highlighting that the Chamber of Commerce are not in full agreement. It seems to me that the plan is to rebuild the roads and then just do more of the same in terms of business and retail offerings in the town centre. There hasn't been a comprehensive economic needs assessment. There is no assessment of the gaps that exist in the offerings at the moment, and there is no clear plan to bring younger people to the town centre, and there is no understanding of what it is they're looking for and what their retail and services needs are. The answer isn't just as simple as bringing more people in. You need to be offering the right mix of products and services, and I think there needs to be a bit more science applied to the rationale for these road upgrades. Madam Chair, I realise I'm going on. I've only got like 2 more pages to go.
Two more pages?
Yeah, this is the end of the second page.
If you could reduce it, it'll be great, but otherwise I'll let you go.
Thank you. I'll try my best. The macro plan report recently commissioned by the city talks more about what the city should do to measure the effectiveness of the plan works, rather than demonstrate any evidence that there will be an economic benefit from actually doing the works, apart from 5 FTE employment during construction and ultimately 11 at full build-out or full completion. This is the crucial evidence that is missing, and it is the fatal flaw of the whole report. I'll skip the part that talks about how Mount Lawley and Beaufort Street has had success in doing this. An eminent community development leader, Peter Kenyon, stated that the communities that are thriving are ones that put themselves at the centre, begin to realise that they need to become masters of their own destiny. They are not in free fall, they're not waiting for outside forces. Under the banner of asset-based community development, Peter also states, we've increasingly become spectator communities where we're waiting for them to do something for us, and often people perceive the them to be the local council. Business development and job creation are key factors in developing healthy, sustainable and enterprising communities. Sustainable community development does not occur from a quick fix measure, and it is usually the result of a mix of initiatives related to building upon a community's competitive advantages. Peter's Business Expansion and Retention Program quotes John McKnight from Mapping Community Capacity, who says, "All the historic evidence indicates that significant community development only takes place when local community people are committed to investing themselves and their resources in the effort. That's why you can't develop communities from the top down or from the outside in." A report from the Rural Industries Research and Development Corporation, which is a statutory authority on behalf of the federal government, states it is essential that community builders and leaders understand what gets the tills ringing and become supportive of community policies and strategies that encourage and reward positive business behaviours and attitudes. This is the home stretch. I am yet to be convinced that the "if you build it, they will come" theory will eventuate. I have been a strong advocate for small and medium local businesses for many years, but without sufficient information, I can't support this. What is being asked of Council on behalf of the community is to borrow millions of dollars over the next 2 years and to start paying that money back over many years. The repayments required will now and for years replace community-based spending around the city in Pickering Brook, Lesmurdie, Wattle Grove, Forestfield, High Wycombe, Maida Vale and Grisby Hill, to name just a few. These communities will be at a disadvantage for years as a result of this decision, with the projected population increases in the foothills, which will be beyond 70% of the city's residents all living in the foothills. There will be an even stronger need for community facilities such as a modern, fully equipped, purpose-built aquatic centre, to use just as an example. The type of facilities that will service the needs of our community now and into the future, and located where the bulk of the residents live. Last paragraph. I spend a lot of time in Kalamunda, with about half of that being council-related activities. People are not stopping me in the street saying, "You need to rip this road up and rebuild it." Actually, the responses are quite the opposite. People are always giving me feedback about how they love the character and the feel of the town centre, which I understand is the main draw card for why people who are looking for that lifestyle choose to move to Kalamunda. Historically, I've supported borrowings for projects or assets that demonstrate a return on investment and a tangible benefit to the city and ratepayers. And in this case, I can't support it based on the limited evidence provided to me. The evidence is not there. There are lots of ambitious claims about doubling and tripling the return on investment, but I simply haven't got the sufficient evidence. And I'm quite certain the ratepayers who I answer to would not want me to take a leap of faith with their hard-earned dollars. So without a comprehensive and robust business case, supported by the business and resident community, I cannot support this project at this time. And can I make my last point, that is, not even the councillors sitting in this room have agreement about the work that should be done. And we are essentially flipping a coin as we work out how to spend $2.4 million. So I'll leave with that point and I will vote against it.
Councillors, I would like to speak for the motion. So I'll start off with saying I've been a North Ward councillor for 10.5 years, and what I've heard so many times is fix up the town centre. And I think current North Ward councillors, other councillors have also said this, and certainly previous North Ward councillors will have all heard this, fix up the town centre. And we get quoted all these streets. What about, you know, that beautiful street in Harndorf in the Barossa Valley? What about this street? Go and look at that street. Let's do something nice in our town centre. And most people will agree that these streets, Haines Central, it's the central part of the city of Kalamunda. The owner of several shops in Central Mall has said that if we do fix up Central Mall, he will work with us and fix up his shops. He'll put canopies on within to make it all look the same. There is not less parking in Central Mall. There's going to be more parking, and we've heard that there's 350,000 allocated to this. So we can put in a lot more parking base in Central Mall. There may be less in Haines Street, but we are talking about Central Mall. As Councillor Sewell so ably said, this is about businesses, but not only about businesses. This is about hope and celebration, and the city's doing something. It's making it beautiful. You can't deny the thousands of people who come to Central Mall for the Sunday markets, the artisan markets on Saturday and the night markets. It's just wall-to-wall people, and they're all going to enjoy the benefits of fixing this up for many years to come. So the beauty, we're not borrowing millions of dollars, we're borrowing $1 million. And at 1.24%, the beauty of that is it's so incredibly cheap, and people in the future, while we're paying that off, will get to enjoy where it was spent. It is going to be quite beautiful. The photos are just really beautiful. So I refute Peter Forrest's comment about the Chamber of Commerce are not for this, because I've spoken to many people in the Chamber of Commerce and they said, you need to fix up the town centre. It's important. My last point is, this isn't a competition. It's not like we're going to do up the hill, but we're not going to do down the hill. I want to do everything. And when we get the chance to do an activity centre in High Wycombe, Forestfield, Wattle Grove, I will be in there supporting that. So it's not just this, it's everything in our city. And as we go forward, we need to work through those. So I urge you to do what everybody wants us to do, and let's fix up the town centre, starting with Central Mall. Is there a speaker against the motion?
I just have a question.
Question?
If that's okay. I've just noticed I'm new to the city here. When we have spent the amount of money that we have spent in the projects that we have done, you've just mentioned only one business owner, is that correct, said to you that if we upgrade either street, they're quite happy to do the same with their shop frontage and come to the party to make their shop or their business look.
I didn't say that others wouldn't, I just said one had approached me.
So only one has approached you. Why don't we have the people here speaking for this and saying the same thing that you're saying? And like I said, I haven't been here that long.
Those people did speak and put in submissions when we did the activity centre.
And is that what Dylan was talking about?
No. People...
No, sorry, I just needed to know that. That's okay.
I just know that the owner that I'm talking about did put in a submission.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. Director Development Services, could you give Councillor Cannon an overview of the submissions for the activity centre, please?
Through the Chair, we received a noteworthy number of submissions through the consultation process for the activity centre plan, and as I highlighted in the briefing over the Central Mall proposed upgrades, Central Lane proposed upgrades, there were mixed views and opinions. We did receive a significant submission from a landowner that has a significant frontage to Central Lane, and they represent a number of business owners within there as well. So it is one landowner, but multiple businesses, I believe maybe a handful or more businesses that landowner has within their tenancies, and they put forward a submission as one submission, but it represented a number of businesses and landowner. So that's in regards to Central Lane, and they did support the upgrades of Central Lane and also the use of cash in lieu funds to supplement any upgrades to Central Lane.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against the motion?
Can I ask the Director of Development Services to make a further comment, if that's okay?
Sure.
Just wondering if you could make a comment on the comments that the Chamber of Commerce made in that same report, please.
Through the Chair, pulling on my memory a little bit there, Councillor Boyd, the Chamber of Commerce submission is available as part of the public documents within the activity centre plan when it was considered by Council in March, but there were some mixed opinions by the Chamber of Commerce at that point in time. But I do note that the leadership within the Chamber of Commerce has changed since that submission was made, and also I believe the executive officer within the Chamber of Commerce has also changed. So the currency of that submission in the current context would be difficult to comment on.
Is there a speaker against the motion? I will go back to the move.
No, I will speak against as well. Thank you, Madam Chair. I totally agree with Councillor O'Connor, and one of the reasons that I feel strongly about this is the fact that Most of the Kalamunda Town Centre landowners have not put much money or effort into upgrading their buildings and the street appeal of their properties over many, many, many years. And I find that disgraceful. These buildings, they're old, tired, they need upgrading, whilst others have been demolished and vacant land has just been left sitting idle for years. And yet these same landowners and the community around the town centre want all the other ratepayers of the city to fund upgrades to these streets. I don't think it's fair when we are now going to look at investing a huge amount of money into an area when the area itself has not been looked after by the very people that own the properties that are there. They have not, for many years, they don't spend money on it. They take no care about what their properties look like. They charge high rents. That is why those buildings are not rented. It's because the rates are ridiculous. And so, of course, they are going to get enormous benefit, and then they're going to be in a position where they will be able to charge even more rent because of the funds that have been expended into the area and improved the area to such a degree where they will then turn around and charge more rent to their tenants. And I just find that I have to agree that they should be doing what they should have been doing a long time ago, years ago, and that upsets me, and I think it's not fair. And I think there's a lot of other areas where an investment of that calibre would be appreciated a lot more. Thank you.
Speaker for the motion, Councillor O'Donnell.
I think that we need to think about this outside the economic development realm, because the community development and social impact value of this investment and the ideas related to placemaking as a whole, because there is much more that can be indicative of success than just money and people and retail and employment. You know, we've got increases on conversations, successes of events, utilisers of street space and park spaces are such indicators that can be used to evaluate income on a social impact level, and that is something that I think we are missing, because all I hear in this argument is, should we spend this on business? It's not going to promote that business, it's not going to make money. You know, although we are very diligent with money, we are not in the same realm of a business making money. We are here to help the community, and that is the point that I'm trying to make. We need to facilitate long-term sustainability of activity centres, and I think that this project offers that opportunity to be delivered across the city, to promote investors to consider us on the whole. And research, I've looked at research showing that building that sense of place, not only it's going to attract creative and talented people from an employment and residential perspective, people will move here because they are attracted to the area, the look and feel. Having a walkable area will increase property values, not to mention promoting our health and well-being, the plan, increase our social capital. And when we show early promises, I think we can demonstrate to the community and the government that we have potential for further innovation funding and grants to build more benefits back to our communities. And I think we need to start looking at the value of these activities, catching up, being with friends, children out on the streets, playing in the green spaces, considering people who are here for the environment, who like being out and about, enjoying our natural history, heritage, and reading in the open areas. We need to provide certainty to our community and investors about our expectations for town centres. We know we are constrained for development, and this is one way to ensure that our area can be a very attractive area and a vibrant place to live, work and shop. We need to keep people in our community longer to maximise spending and time in our community. We know we need to support existing businesses so they can retain and attract customers. And we also need to capture data on people by using things like Wi-Fi to keep people connected in our community and also know what they're up to. We need streetscapes and art to keep people entertained and inspired and travelling over just for the experiences so that we know what we're doing. It's no secret what we see in the town centre represents character and design that is no longer best practice in terms of shopping centre designs, land use planning and the integration of the area into the broader retail and commercial precinct fronting Haines and Central. Transformative change is necessary to fulfil our future visions and aspirations of this area. Obviously, it's not my preference to do half of it, but you know, I would love that we could do the connectivity of the region justice, and I'm sure that we'd agree the interbases cause significant issues in relation to pedestrian access and amenity and OH&S issues on the whole. This does, however, in recent months promise relative good things, more tenancy and functions being operated within this area, and I believe if we show commitment, so will others. We need to address, sorry, I've got one more sentence. Jeez, stupid computer, sorry. We need to address these barriers to investment that could impact upon achieving our economic development and strategic objectives as a community and a city. Transport is improving, and with the train station in High Wycombe, buses will be bringing people from surrounding suburbs and neighbours, tourists alike. I did actually have the opportunity to look at some economic development examples I could find in Brisbane. I know it's not Brisbane, but I just wanted to find an example. They spent $4 million in a mall. They had 500 million of new projects. Obviously, I don't expect 500 million, but you know, I'm sure that there's a case to be made either way that there is going to be evidence that investing streetscape renovations to build thriving arts and entertainment areas that is improving retail, restaurants, entertainment and more. So in closing, economic development organisations such as councils around the world, around Australia, have recognised in order to attract highway growth industries, communities must offer quality amenities that are attractive, make our areas desirable places to live. We need to strengthen our brand, and I think we can go a long way by starting with the Kalamunda Town Centre. We're not in local government just for the dollars and cents. We also need to consider the people, the community and the social impact and investment. We can build these parameters, and I think it's a good test case for how it can be done across our communities and other local governments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Is there another speaker against? Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hopefully won't take as long as Councillor O'Connor, but I do have some points I'd like to make. So I've read the submissions that were made to the activity centre plan, and some of my comments will be based around those submissions, as well as some other comments that have been made to me personally. So one of my concerns is that the city's about to spend an indicative 2.7 million on Central Lane and then a further 2.4 on Haines over the next 2 years. However, the city's not actually able to change or control any private land developments. I haven't read a collective buy-in from business owners willing to improve shop fronts or aesthetics. So in essence, the city will be removing long-term 122 parking bays across the entire activity centre plan, or from what I read, 51 on-street parking bays. Comments from the community indicate that we should be fixing what we have rather than spending large amounts of money. And other comments is that the proposal should be abandoned altogether as it has no value to residents, and that's the words of the residents, not mine. As a councillor, I receive many calls and emails about issues before council or occurring within the city, citywide issues that is. One area I haven't had calls on is residents asking for works to occur in either Haines Street or Central Mall. Other councillors may have, but I haven't. Discussions around reducing speed limits, particularly on Canning Road, yes. I'm happy to advocate and support this as I have been. I haven't seen a significant feasibility study for this development. I'm concerned that the current proposal may turn Kalamunda into a Victoria Park or a Subiaco, where residents have had less street parking, resulting in movements away from supporting local business. Personally, I don't have enough information in front of me to support this project at this time. Thank you.
Is there another speaker for? Councillor Sewell, do you have a question? You've already spoken on this motion, Councillor Sewell. Councillor Stallard.
Yes, there was a lot of comments I'd like to have made, but I congratulate Councillor O'Donnell on a beautiful presentation. It really took the heart out of what I wanted to say, except to say that I've been involved in council and in the community for a long time. I shop 2 or 3 times, or in the centre about 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm also down the hill and all around the area. Many people, and when I was on the Signet group some 20 years ago representing council, the comment was quite often, please stimulate the area, stimulate the centre, get rid of it. I was on council with a gentleman called Leon English, who many people around would know of him from the past. And we had to fight then to try and upgrade and get rid of this dated old centre. I've had nobody say to me ever that this is a wonderful experience in this wonderful little township, in this little 50, 60 type, what the heck. We destroyed businesses when we closed the Central Mall. And I taught one of the young men in geography who set up a business there, and we closed it and we destroyed his business. So we need to reopen it. And so we made decisions. So we can make decisions to destroy them, but we shouldn't be making decisions to help them. What the heck? I mean, let's get it together. I have had people say to me for the past 20 plus years, fix up the township. And what's happened? Bugger all. What we did was we went in there and did a whole lot of work and we actually caused a couple of other businesses to go bust and close because of the works we were doing in there. People couldn't access businesses. They didn't want to go in there. It's a mess. People couldn't work and walk in there. It was just a nightmare. Trying to improve it, but it did a lot of damage. Now we're left with this, as I mentioned earlier when we were not in normal procedure, what it was when we suspended standing orders, I said then, people find it hard to get around. Families with prams, elderly people with disabilities. And I suggest probably Councillor Sewell would know 1 or 2 young people around who have a terrible battle trying to get around in Kalamunda. And a nightmare for them. Let's start to fix it up. Let's start to put a bit of effort in. It's the heart, it's the centre, and we need to do something. All right, why should businesses invest in something if we can't be bothered? How can some of these businesses, if they don't own the businesses and they're tenants, get in there? One of the leading landowners who has 5 or 6 businesses in Kalamunda has indicated he will start to do something. Great, it's good. Okay, that's what we want, and it will flow on. It always flows on. If you are beautifying doing something in your street and a whole lot of people start doing it, there's pressure for the rest to do something, and that's what will start to happen. It will be a flow, and that's why we need to start doing something urgently with the centre. And let's not get it wrong, most of our centres throughout the Kalamunda city are pretty average. They're average in image, in their buildings, in a lot of them are. Okay, there's some good ones amongst them, but a lot of them are. We're going to have to do a lot of work in all the centres. But do we stop and say, no, we're not going to do any work here, down there, down the hill, or in the other areas, out Pickering, Brooklyn area? Are we going to say we're not going to do any work because we didn't do it here? We can't afford it, we don't want to do it because it's going to help businesses? You guys, you can't destroy them and then not want to help them. And that's what we've done in the past. I think we need to fix it up and get moving. And that's what we haven't been doing in the past. As originally said by Councillor Jardina, he's 30 years. I've had 40 odd years here and I've seen virtually nothing done of any substance in the area. And all we've done is put it in the back burner, and what have we got? We've got nothing that's got any real appeal or character. We need to change that. We need to revitalise it. And by the way, even though I'm a bit reluctant to support Central versus the main street, which to me is the front of your house sometimes determine whether people are going to come and have a look or buy or whatever, well, you know, and that's why I still wanted to go the other way, but I at least want this to get started. I want something to happen, because don't forget, if we can draw the people from around our city into the centre, then funds start flowing. And if we can get outside dollars in, bonus. Then we're going to help people survive. At the moment, we're sitting here saying, well, let's not do anything because we don't want Kalamunda to survive or succeed. And that's rather a sad state of affairs. So I think we should urgently support this.
Is there a speaker against? I will go back to the mover. Councillor Giardina.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's I've got to commend Councillor O'Donnell for her spiel. What she put forward and what should happen and what we should be doing as a council, and the reasons why we should be improving the Kalamunda town site and others, not only Kalamunda. And but you know, I've got to say that I'm a little bit perplexed and disappointed, to say the least, with some comments of some of my other fellow councillors prior to Councillor O'Donnell. One of them is on the Economic Development Advisory Committee, and he is hoping to chair it. And yet, there's no support for our business section. We talked about business this evening, other than Councillor O'Donnell.
Come on, excuse me, through the chair, Councillor.
Excuse me, did I interfere when you spoke? No.
Perhaps we could just not mention other councillors.
Well, I didn't. Okay. I didn't mention his name, and there's another one that I'll mention also, another councillor, and I've got comments to make.
Perhaps you could not make those, Councillor.
I didn't mention their names. He spoke up, actually.
Let's have some order here. I've asked Councillor Giardina not to talk about other councillors.
I hope this is not of things to come with this advisory committee, that there's a couple of these councillors that are on there when it comes to doing what we need to do as a council, that will probably stifle some of the developments that we need to be doing. That concerns me greatly, what I'm hearing this evening. Concerns me greatly. So I just...
Point of order, Madam Chair. I'm being misrepresented, thank you.
I need to say that. I just worry by some of the comments that were made this evening. Last couple of weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, a councillor again mentioned that Councillor Giardina was not supporting small business.
Perhaps we could stop talking about councillors.
Not long ago, this council voted for an Economic Development Advisory Committee. Are we supporting small business or aren't we? This evening, it was mentioned again, small business. We've got it against small business, it appears. But
excuse me, Madam Chair, I've already made a point of order. I'm being misrepresented as a councillor on the Economic Development Committee. Can you make a ruling?
I didn't realise it was you, sorry.
I'm pretty sure you did, and I've
I think that's enough, Councillor Boyd and Councillor Giardina.
I wasn't here when you
Let's just wind this up, Councillor Giardina, so we can vote.
Madam Chair, I think I've got to say that tonight's arguments have been put up has been very eloquently done by Councillor Brooke O'Donnell. She spelt it out, and some of the areas that we haven't touched on, she did. It's all about community. And small businesses there, they will bring community in, they will have to do whatever they need to do, spruce their businesses up and what have you. And look, it has always been done. If you make money, you will spend money. You have to spend money to bring people in. As a business, that's what you do. You've got to spend it. And if you're not making it, and at the moment, have a look what's happening around not only Kalamunda, but many, many others around the state and across across Australia and elsewhere. No one's making money, so we can't expect that to happen at the moment. We can't expect some of these guys to go out and put up new shop fronts and what have you. But hopefully in time, they will do that. I'm sure they will. It's going to take time. It's going to take time for us to build the roads, to do what we look. How many years that we've hung around trying to do something. Yes, we'll do it, we'll do something, but it's always too much. It's always too much of a cost. You know, that's what we're up against. But if someone starts, and I'm trying to sort of avoid pointing fingers at individuals. I know that there's people out there that have, pulled their shops down and they've left open spaces that, they're an eyesore. But we have got no power to control those individuals, those landowners. I'd love to do it, but we can't. But it's not only them that I want to cater for. I cater for all of our community. You look at the markets, they come in, 10,000 on one night come in. And that's our little Kalamunda town square there, the central lane. Haines Street brings them in. Bad as it is, it brings them in. So can you imagine what it's going to be like if we beautify it? Hopefully there'll be more coming in and we'll survive up here. We need people to survive, to come up the hill, to attract them to come up here. We've got to spend some monies, as many other local authorities have done over the years. If you don't, it's going to be the sleepy old town where a lot of people are happy the way it is, but a lot of people want something done, and I know that's to be the case. I'm a South East Ward councillor, but my gee, when I took over the mayor's role, they were on to me. They want something done. They want something done. And I hear it all the time because I work out the industry, within my industry as a Sparky. I hear it all the time that they want things done in Haines Street. Okay, councillors from the foothills, they don't because they're not up here. But we do hear it. So, as far as the Chamber of Commerce is concerned, Peter Forrest made mention this evening that I just spoke to the Chamber President before I came here this evening. I don't know where he's getting that from. So, and I spoke to some business owners this evening before I came here. So, look, councillors, we need to start doing something. And if we don't, we're going to leave it as it is and Kalamunda's going to die. There's no doubt in my mind, if we can't get tourists up here, Kalamunda will die. Is that what we want? As a top-of-the-hill councillor? No, absolutely not. Or as the councillor for the city of Kalamunda? Absolutely not. It's the oldest town in our city. The oldest. 1870 it was started, Kalamunda, and look where it is today. By the looks of things, we haven't advanced very much. And, I commend councillors to please start doing something in this town site, please.
Right, we've got a mover and a seconder. We've had lots of debate. Let's put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Stallard, Councillor Giardina, Councillor Sewell, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Blair, Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Thomas, and against Councillor Boyd, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Billich, Councillor Cooper and Councillor O'Connor. Motion is carried 7-5. Thank you. Councillors, on page 29, part 4D, Wollaston Transfer Station, are there any questions? Do I have a mover? Councillor Sewell, seconded by Councillor Stallard. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Part E, Street Light Rollout Program. Do I have a mover? Councillor Blair, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. F, Clean Out of Drainage Systems in Peri-urban and Rural Areas. Do I have a mover? Councillor Blair, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. Councillor Blair. Councillor Boyd, thank you. Carried unanimously. G, installation of new female sport change rooms at Costera, Rayo and Scott Reserve and Maida Vale. Do I have a mover? Councillor Blair, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. H, improvements to selected parks, car parking expansion, etc. You've got it in front of you. Is there a mover? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Blair. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I, City Park and Reserve signage. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sewell, seconded by Councillor Cooper. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Rayo and Car Park. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stallard, seconded by Councillor Giardina. Councillors, please pull me up if you want to debate, otherwise I'll just keep moving through these. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Woodlapine Brook Restoration Project. A mover, Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Part 5. New reserves established and change in use. So we've got 2 points about this. Are there any questions? The officer recommendation is on page 31 and 32. Do I have a mover? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Boyd. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Part 6, new loans. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder, and then I will ask the mover and the seconder if they will accept the amendment put forward by Councillor Boyd. If they are happy for that amendment, we'll vote on that. If they are not, we will go to the amendment. So I hope you all understand that.
Madam Chair, does Councillor Boyd, you still want to put through your amendment?
You do? Okay, so the original motion, do I have a mover? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Sewell. Councillor Boyd, do you wish to put this amendment? Yes. Councillor O'Donnell and Councillor Sewell, are you happy for Councillor Boyd's amendment, which is to do them individually?
Yeah, I'm just assuming it's to debate something, so that's fine.
You happy with that, Councillor Sewell? Okay, so we'll go into the amendment. So we'll start with A, B and C. Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Sewell. So do you understand where we are? We're looking at the amendment. Does everyone understand what we're doing? So I'm going to ask you to vote on A, B and C. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Do I have a mover for the Kalamunda Centre upgrade stage 1? Councillor Sewell and Councillor O'Donnell again. I'm going to put the motion. I don't think we need to debate it. We'll just put it. All those in favour? Councillor Stallard, Councillor Giardina, Councillor Sewell, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Blair, Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Thomas. And against, Councillor Boyd, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Billage, Councillor Cooper and Councillor O'Connor. Motion is carried. E, the female change rooms, 900,000. Do I have a mover? Councillor Boyd, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We're up to part 7. Are there any questions? No? Can I have a mover for this motion? I'm happy to move this. Councillor Thomas, seconded by Councillor Blair. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Stallard, yes. Carried unanimously. Part 8. So I'm going to do this the same. I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder, and then I'm going to ask them if they will accept Councillor Dillon's amendment. Are you happy with that, Councillor O'Connor? Councillor O'Connor, not Dillon, sorry. It's been a long night. So moved by Councillor Boyd, seconded by Councillor Blair. So Councillor Boyd and Councillor Blair, are you happy to remove points D and E be deleted and the following added as per Councillor O'Connor's amendment? Yes, Councillor Blair? Yes. So we are now going to vote on the amendment to the recommendation. So it's the same as part 8. Oh, sorry, I need a seconder.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Is it accepted by the mover and the seconder?
Yes.
So it becomes part of the substantive motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's what I was trying to explain. It's the 8, but with those. Yeah, we've got a mover and a seconder. I'm going to put the motion.
Sorry, I wish to speak against the motion.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you for speaking up. So I'll go to the mover. Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I think moving this motion with the amendment just allows for taking into consideration the times that we're in. If our ratepayers choose to pay through instalments, we are removing the administration fee, but they do still incur interest fees. And the removal of the $10,000 rates incentive scheme, I think some councillors were still surprised that that remained. I do understand there is another component of a prize that has been donated that will still form part of a incentive scheme, be made available. Whether that carries into other years, I don't know. And my understanding is that this these amendments is for this year's budget, and what we choose to do as a council, what council chooses to do next year is up to council next year. So I think we need to consider where we are this year and the times that everybody's experiencing out there at this point in time. It's not everybody who's experienced hardship will necessarily, excuse me, come to the city seeking help. A lot of people have pride out there, so it allows people to still pay their rates in instalments. Some may say $8 administration fee per instalment is not a lot. Others may see it as being a lot. Cumulatively, it may be a lot for the city, but there's the differential of the $10,000. So I urge councillors just to support this.
Councillor Blair, do you wish to... Your question, Councillor?
I do have a question. I did notice that it is entitled Budget 2021. Can I make the assumption that we're only, if we're in favour of this, we're only voting on it for 2021? My concern is the $27,000 we're foregoing, and while I would accept that in a year like this, I think ongoing that could be an issue. I'm assuming that if we vote on this to forego that $27,000, it's only about this year.
Director of Corporate Services, could you answer that?
Through the Chair, that's correct.
So it's clear it's just for this year. As the seconder, Councillor Blair, do you wish to add something?
Yes, I'm happy just to go over what Councillor Boyd just stated. The residents that enter into this payment plan, they're making a decision that they have to stretch their payments over a year. There are various reasons why they have to do this. The most reason is that they're having to stretch money through the year to make it. I think that there is an interest fee of, is it 5.5% or something like that, if I could be clarified on that. Yes, there's a nod of the head. And that these residents shouldn't have to pay a penalty fee after they pay an interest fee on their rates. And I just think that this is a small savings for the residents that are stretched in our community, and I just think it's the right thing to do at this point in time with where we are.
Thank you, Councillor Blair. I'll go to a speaker against, Councillor Stallard.
Yes, I suppose I can start with here saying that I've been a bit disappointed with the process and some of these last minute decisions. We've had meetings all over the place. We've had meetings early in March where we talked about stuff where we got together, and none of this stuff, a lot of these things just didn't bother floating to the surface. And I know we have a right to change our mind and change things right up to the last minute, but I think the community and some councillors are a bit concerned about this process and this online process that I've seen happening all of a sudden, where there's been a bit of lobbying and stuff happening for people to support these sort of things. I think we had got the process a little wrong here. I don't mind the reduction in the amount. I don't mind the fact that we reduced the charges, although we've already agreed that that was going to be involved in the COVID-19 $1 million package. So to say that this is suddenly there to help, it is a bit of a, you know, a bit of a long string and a bit of a furphy. Like some of the other ideas that have been floated around, I think it's not good to be making decisions like we are on the run. I think the community needed a bit more time. I think the community needed a bit more involvement to understand what we were doing tonight and what we're about. I didn't see much of that. The car prize raised was a furphy from way back. That's a nonsense. That came out of the blue and used for an emotive comment. I found that sad. I agree we could have looked at incentives, or actually we could have looked at incentives in another way, like or tying it into the COVID-19 aspect and saying, all right, and I know some councillors say, well, let's not do anything for businesses. I understand that as well. But the point is, we could have gone to some of these businesses and said, would you be interested in being used as an opportunity to give a prize for people who pay in advance to go out there and they win the prize, then they will spend $100 or $200. Say we had 10 people, that would have been $2,000. Getting $200 each. That would have been something, if you'd given us time, if we'd put it in then, that would have been a better thing. But to just suddenly rip it out, I find that sad, because I come to the point, with no incentive, then we will be going against many other local governments' procedures. To have money in the bank is always seen as a bonus. We could be in a situation, if we reduce the cost of processing, then why should I? I'm going to change my paying process. I pay in one lump sum. I'm going to change it and pay right up until the last date that's allowable, because I can, and it's going to be a little bit more cost effective, right? A little bit of interest, but it still gives me the chance to have the money available to be used for a longer period. Okay, so we need to have the money in the bank to be able to forward our planning, to keep our planning going. We don't want to have meetings all the time where we're going to go, look, there's not enough coming in, there's not enough in here. It's not flowing in. And I don't want to see anyone saying anywhere that this is something that's only affecting the people up the hill or anywhere else. This is for the whole of the city. And quite often the people who win the prizes often come from down the hill. So we can't say it is ward specific or anything like that. It's good that that hopefully doesn't turn up. I think it's another aspect as well. By taking it away, you become forgetful. I get forgetful about the payments and things unless I come up with one that's automatically taken out. So what could happen down the track as we create more stress for our residents? We start creating a situation where they may face legal fees and legal stuff, and getting a letter from a lawyer is never a good thing, or from some credit turkey who's giving you a hard time, or one of these people collecting. And I've had that happen to me mistakenly, but it still didn't help. So as I said, we already have a package in place. To use that is a little folly. Certainly, as I said, we have the capacity to offset that. As our director said, our budget is predicated on incentives to pay early. We start removing this, then we may, many of us may choose to pay over a long term, taking away that opportunity to be financially able to continue programs and projects. So while I agree we could have had some reduction, while I agree that we could have done some of this money taken away, I think to suddenly remove the incentive aspect was just badly done. And I'm not sure which way I'd vote on this, but I just want to express my opinion that we didn't do this well, and I think we've made a bit of a meal of it in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker for the motion? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've only got one page and a bit, so I'll go as quickly as I can. So I'm proposing to remove the 10,000 rates incentive scheme and remove the rates instalment administration fee of $8 for each instalment after the initial one. For many years, the City of Kalamunda has included a rates incentive prize for ratepayers who pay their rates in full and on time. Historically, the city has given away new cars, fact, not trying to be emotional, it's just a fact. They have done it, 2, maybe 3 cars, and significant cash prizes, some of which were supplied through sponsorship arrangements. The incentive scheme is designed to ensure the city has sufficient cash flow to carry out its day-to-day functions and to meet its financial obligations every month. There is no data to show that the incentive program actually improves the cash flow situation for the city. It's been in place for a long time, but there's no way of measuring whether that's what makes people pay. Given the economic environment we're in, I believe it is appropriate to remove this rates incentive scheme. In the event that there are cash flow issues because a significant number of ratepayers choose to pay by instalments, there are options available to the city to easily meet its obligations. COVID-19 has impacted the community and will continue to do so for the next year or 2 at least. The city has taken a strong position on assisting ratepayers through a number of initiatives. Aside from COVID-19, many families choose the instalment option simply because there is no way they could pay their rates in full for a variety of reasons, but mainly due to a low household income. I'm of the view that people who choose to pay by instalments should not be penalised by paying an $8 administration fee on each instalment after the first one. I propose to remove the $10,000 be utilised to cover administration costs for processing the instalments, acknowledging that there may be a shortfall of around $25,000 based on the forecasted revenue amounts. The state government has directed the local government sector to exhaust all opportunities to support ratepayers and families in our community. I believe these small changes, as well as the significant initiatives the city has proposed or passed this evening, a couple of $1 million or $1 million, will contribute to achieving the directive of the Premier. I know a few families who I strongly suspect will not apply for COVID hardship due to pride and other reasons. Finally, to be clear, this amendment doesn't remove the interest loading on the instalments. And if you look at Part 5 of the Local Government Financial Management Regulations, 1996, it states that the maximum rate of interest to be imposed is 5.5%. So we are charging the maximum interest. We aren't. We are claiming that revenue back. So we're not losing that revenue. So what we're saying is, just because you can charge a fee, it doesn't mean you should. Councillor Stallard talked about decisions on the run. Tonight we've essentially flipped a coin on where to spend $2.4 million. So we need to put some context around decisions on the run. And I'll just note that 5 or 6 days ago, I sent an email saying, I'm not going to die in the ditch on this if there's not a consensus. But there was a consensus. So it was a very open and honest process. So based on the consensus the sense I got from the community, I ask you, in the interest of all residents, to support the amendment this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I go back to the mover, Councillor Boyd? Oh, is there any more speakers?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sorry, you want to speak for the motion? Oh, question.
Okay, so based on what's been put forward tonight, it would appear that we would be at a loss of $15,000 if 25, but then if we're not giving out the $10,000 on top. Okay, so 25 in total. Sorry, I just want clarity on that. Thank you.
Another question?
Yes, Madam Chair. Could I please have a comment from the Director of Corporate Services or our CEO just regarding these changes?
Yes, I will, Councillor Billich, but I will tell you also that we heard from the Director during dinner and you were not able to be here. So you wish to ask the question, is there enough incentive, that sort of comment?
Are they comfortable with what's proposed?
I'll go to the Director of Corporate Services.
Through the chair, look, it's a council decision in terms of whether we're comfortable or not is probably not really the issue. It's more the end of the day, rates incentives have historically been put up to encourage people to pay early for cash flow reasons, and I think there's been some conversations tonight about whether there is clear evidence supporting the view that if you put the incentive up, you're going to get the money in earlier. And the short answer to that, there isn't clear evidence to support that view. But equally, there's no clear evidence to support the view that by not having it there, people's repayment habits will change. From our point of view, the incentives that were put up this year were amended so that they were not designed to be actually cash out the door as such, but more in terms of a credit off the future rates, which Councillor Boyd spoke about earlier. So I guess from our perspective, it's not a killer, but there's varying arguments around how successful or otherwise an incentive program will be, and there's no real clear-cut way of defining it, and it's really ultimately a decision for council.
So Councillor O'Connor spoke for the motion. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? I'll go back to the mover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just touch on a couple of points that were raised. I think Councillor Stella might have been the only person that spoke against. Unfortunately, he expressed that he feels a little bit blindsided. I guess we got this agenda on Thursday, and I think some councillors, from what I understand, were a little bit surprised, I think, to see that this incentive is still an incentive from some of the comments that I read. So maybe not everybody was aware that it still remained, and I know there are some councillors that have raised this before, so I guess some people were aware that it was coming and others may not have been aware it was coming. So I guess in essence, while the incentive to pay early might be being removed, in the times that we're currently in, and to clarify the point from Councillor Ritchie, this is for this year's or for next year's budget, ticking over in a couple of hours, as is everything tonight. Those people that do need to stretch their finances, be it across 2, 3 or 4 payments, why do they need to be penalised further? Because they are, their money is tight, they're experiencing some hardships. Why do we need to penalise them further? They do get that extra 5.5% interest. So this is providing them a little bit of relief. As I said previously, some may see it as a lot, some may see it as a little, but it's just something in these current times. And to say that paying in instalments or not paying instalments, you may end up incurring debt collectors. When you do pay in instalments, you still get your reminder notices. So it's like no other bill that you receive. So I don't think that I don't think the city's going to be that way inclined. I don't think we're going to be putting people into any other, more hardship than that they're in. I think in these times, this is a move that's hopefully going to assist some members of our community. Thank you.
Councillor Sewell, you've got a question?
Just a point of clarity. Thank you, Mayor. I just note that Councillor Boyd said that some councillors were aware and knew that it was coming, so I'm just wondering whether some councillors were privileged to be briefed or received a briefing. I just wanted to seek some clarity on that perhaps other councillors weren't privy to.
I don't know who's going to answer that. Councillor O'Connor, perhaps you could.
I can clarify what I meant, if that assists.
Yes.
Yeah, so what I mean is some councillors indicated they thought that this scheme no longer existed, while other councillors, because they were aware that the scheme has existed previously, may have known that it was coming in this year's budget. So it wasn't a surprise to them that it was in this year's budget.
I think everybody received the amendment notice at the same time. So we are going to now vote on the substantive motion with the amendments as per that you have in front of you. We've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Well done, Councillor Stallard. That's carried unanimously. So part 9, as an accountant, I'm happy to move this, the material variance reporting. Do we have a seconder? As an accountant, I moved it, and it's great that our audit person is seconding it. So is there going to be any debate? Are there any questions? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We now move on to 8.1.3. The recommendation is on page 42. Are there any questions? Do I have a mover? Councillor Sewell, seconded by Councillor Blair. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 8.1.4, the adoption of the COVID-19 Crisis Relief Fund. Are there any questions? The recommendation is on page 48. Do we have a mover? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded Councillor Giardina. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. There is no reason to close the meeting to the public. So at 9:20, I thank councillors for an excellent meeting and declare it closed.